What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and today we're going to do a bit of an angry rant because I feel like the industry is not only bad as it currently exists. I have a feeling that here in the next couple years, gaming is about to get a lot worse, but in a different way. In 2024, we've had a bunch of games that launched broken, that were overpriced, that straight up did not have enough features, unoriginal, or just in general, it feels like gaming has hit this weird rough patch where it feels like 90% of the stuff that's released sucks or is just suckier than it's supposed to be. But let's talk about a new quote that came out that is kind of riling up the internet. Hi, hope you're having a great day, and if you could, please give this video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Now, this is going to be a very long, kind of rambly video where we're going to talk a lot about the nature of art and the impact of video games, because this is stuff that is incredibly important to me. So, this is kind of a sequel to the video I did yesterday talking about the disappointment with the Until Dawn remake. Now, a lot of people do not like it for a bunch of reasons, but the biggest problem is they removed the uniqueness of it. The original Until Dawn had this interesting blue filter to it that made it where not only were characters' features much more creepy, everybody constantly looked like they were bathed in moonlight, but as you can see, even made the menus a lot easier to read. I've heard a lot of people playing the game, you can't even see a lot of the QuickTime events and stuff because they tried to go for hyper-realism, which meant even the button prompts are harder to see. And a lot of people are saying, why would you even want to change this? Now, I wasn't going to talk, but then I saw this. So this is about the film industry, but I've seen a bunch of game directors, game developers and stuff chiming in that this is probably going to happen to us next. Studios are assembling superfan focus groups to assess various materials for a franchise to avoid social media backlash. They will tell us, if you do that, fans are going to retaliate. If it's early enough and the movie isn't finished yet, we can make those kind of changes. Now, this is stupid for like 15 different reasons that we're going to get into, but even on the surface, I feel like the biggest thing that people kind of forget about is that art is not specifically supposed to be a catch-all. I mean, maybe this is going to be a weird take. Not every video game has to be for every person. I feel like the worst part of this current era of media, I feel like we've gotten to the Netflixification, where back in the day, if you wanted to watch like a gritty, crazy television show, you'd turn on something like HBO. You'd watch The Sopranos, one of my favorite shows of all time. If you wanted a silly comedy, you turn to the animation hour of Fox and see Family Guy back to back with The Simpsons and stuff like that. Every channel was trying to do its own thing, but now in the era of streaming services and subscribing to freaking streaming services, every freaking streamer is trying to do everything at once. Netflix is trying to do animation and big budget and indies and thrillers and like a heartfelt drama where your wife has super booby cancer and stuff like that. And so because of it, they're always drowning because half the projects are failing and half are succeeding. The movie industry, though, I think is indicative of what's happening with the gaming industry right now, which is that as consoles sell more and more and more, there's like 125 million Nintendo Switches. There was 114 million PlayStation 4 sold. There's already like 75 million PlayStation 5 sold. Now that the pool is so big, I feel like every developer is trying to do the biggest capture possible. They call it audience capture. They're trying to sell games to everybody. And so instead of having a small, very dedicated fan base that loves your stuff, you're throwing this wide net that's full of holes, and now nobody's getting caught, and you're confused as to why you're sitting there freaking so messed up. I feel like an interesting example of this is Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, because this game, I gave it a 10 out of 10, a bunch of people gave it a 10 out of 10, and I almost think it's the fact that it's a tinier game that's focused on a particular audience. It's just fun. It's just the Lieutenant Titus going on a freaking alien killing spree of Terminids and trying to protect the glory of the Emperor. This game is not trying to be Call of Duty. It's not trying to sell Call of Duty numbers. It's not trying to be as big as Pokemon. It knows it is a niche game, so in the creation process, they focused on making something that is exactly what they would want to play, and they did it for the tiniest budget possible. But now, because every game is getting overscoped, Now everything has to have 80 billion side quests and 20 hours of filler and a boxed collector's edition that's $500 and a battle pass that the studio may get closed before they're even done making battle pass content. I'm annoyed because I keep thinking of stuff like Sam Barlow is the guy who directed Immortality. Now, if you didn't play Immortality, it's really, really good. But additionally, it is essentially an interactive movie. You're a person that's trying to fast forward and rewind these tapes of some incomplete movies, and you start to see these like otherworldly, possibly shape-shifting vampires. It's a really creepy game. It is a really, really, really good game. It actually got a bunch of awards of best game of 2023 when it came out, or 2022. But my point is the fact that the game is very bizarre, and Sam Barlow pretty much funded it with his team by themselves. They made the entire game, and they didn't care if anybody bought it. Like, yes, everybody's trying to make their money back. Everybody is trying to make a project that is ambitious and cool, but also makes it so you can eat, you know? I mean, even I like to make the videos that I think will get views. That'll be fun for me to do, but also will make it so I can keep eating 18 protein bars a day. But I get annoyed when people are trying to make stuff purely for the audience instead of for the art or for the fulfillment. They don't know what the fans want. No one does. This is a quote a lot of people talked about, and I feel like it's such a great, great point. This guy here does a bunch of stuff with Super Beard Bros, all sorts of stuff. Alex Farsi, this guy is super smart, and he said this: just let people who are good at stuff try stuff. Some will fail, but movies used to have like 50-year tales. Backlash is good. It means bold decisions were made. Disney made better stuff before they listened to us. And this is such a great point because we're going to talk about movies, but also the video game aspect of it. Like, back in the day when they started making Final Fantasy, there was no Final Fantasy before that. They didn't know if it would be a success. I mean, famously, the name of Final Fantasy is even because they were about to go bankrupt. It was the final dream of the studio at the time, Sunsoft, to make a game that would hopefully help them break even. So they put all their hopes and dreams into it, and it was their Final Fantasy for it to succeed, and it did. I mean, it's bizarre to me that now we keep seeing people just try and make stuff that they hope is profitable instead of hope it's good. Back in the day, it's weird to think about the amount of movies that just bombed, like The Thing. I love The Thing. Everybody loves The Thing. That's not even a controversial opinion. That game was very much maligned by critics and stuff at the time when it initially released. A bunch of movies came out and bombed back in the day that now are very, very much beloved darlings. And it's because they didn't listen to the studios. It's because they didn't listen to the audience. It's because they did just want to make good stuff. Say goodbye to anything interesting happening in the huge franchises. No more swings, no more bold choices, just pandering to the most boring section of the fan base. Now, I like this because I think we're in a weird spot where fans are right a lot of the time. So I'm not going to act like groups of fans are wrong about everything. It's the fact that if you're trying to do something different, unique, fun, bold, fulfilling, it takes those dangerous moves, right? Like, I worked at a bookstore for 10 years. I've read lots and lots and lots of books. I've probably read thousands of books. Most of them just like random fiction. So I'm not, obviously I'm not a smart guy, but I do enjoy a good tale. And I always remember one of the books that blew my mind the most is something I'd never seen, I'd never heard of. I primarily read like fantasy novels, and one day a family member told me about Kurt Vonnegut, and this book specifically, Slaughterhouse-Five. It's really short, it's got 208 pages. I read this in one day. You can read it, it's got big font, very easy read, you can read it in like 3 hours. This is this is a book about a guy who gets unstuck in time. He's at a bombing in World War II, and he gets unstuck in time. And so he perceives his life out of order. So constantly he'll see a friend that's like very sick and old, and the next day he wakes up, and all of a sudden his friend's young, and they're hanging out, and everything's good. So he experiences the rest of his life, but out of order. I promise I'm getting to a point. The book is incredibly good. Every time somebody dies or has something bad happen, he just says, "So it goes." I literally have "So it goes" tattooed on my chest because of how good that book is. And my point is that Kurt Vonnegut talks about the fact that he didn't write this book for the critics. He didn't write this book for the fans or anything like that. He wrote it because he thought it was a story that was fun to tell. And I'll be damned if it ain't fun to freaking read. I feel like video games have this weird obsession with trying to make sure they're as pleasing as possible. And I almost feel like I enjoy when something challenges me. Not just difficulty-wise. I think it's interesting when a game does something very, very unique. When a game actually tries to go in its own lane, especially if it succeeds. Night Sky Prince here, he's a big Final Fantasy YouTuber, says art is dead because this is so bad. I still think about stuff randomly like Mass Effect. You know, it's weird that Mass Effect has basically come and gone. Like, I know they're technically making another one, but at this point, I think everybody that wrote, directed, programmed, coded, play tested the original game is gone long since. But anybody who played the Mass Effect games as they were initially coming out, it was mind-blowing because the first game was pretty clunky. The first game did not have very good mechanics. The first game had a lot of issues. Second game, much more playable. If you play the remake of the whole trilogy, it's really, really good. They also fixed a lot of the problems with 1. And then 3, even if it did have a very controversial ending, the conclusion of the Mass Effect trilogy is still really, really unique. A lot of people still are talking about the Mass Effect trilogy today. Now, if they did a bunch of play testing, of market testing, of audience capture, if they just spent there for 10,000 hours asking people what kind of aliens they want to see, what kind of guns they want to see, player feedback is important. But I do feel like, in my mind, and maybe I'm dead wrong, Mass Effect is the kind of game that was made because they weren't listening to people. Same with something like The Witcher. The original Witcher games are made by such a tiny, like CD Projekt Red was an incredibly tiny group of passionate Polish developers who wanted to go out and make something about their favorite book series, which, I don't know about you guys, I did not know that The Witcher existed until the game started coming out. And it's wild to me that now everybody knows what The Witcher is, of course, but also just the fact that it's wild they managed to make something so passionate and cool by themselves, and it became such a mainstream success because they didn't listen. They made it. I keep thinking about stuff like Denis Villeneuve, obviously director of Dune, a bunch of different stuff, and he talks about the fact that he does not make stuff for the masses. He makes it for a single audience member, which is me. I like that video games are still aiming for the fences occasionally. Sometimes video games are still going for those big, epic moments, you know? This year we had some really good indies that I think got more attention because they were unique. Stuff like Crow Country, stuff like Balatro. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's come out that is not just good, but stands out because at this point people are craving freshness instead of just the same exact idea fed to us again and again and again. I want to end this with just one last thing. I'm very into fitness and stuff like that, right? Got my little teeny tiny muscles and stuff like that. And sometimes in bodybuilding, they talk about the fact that lifting is good for the body, strength is good for the soul. It's like an old adage, but it basically comes down to the fact that in order to grow big muscles, you do a lot of reps. You know, you got to do sets of 4 hypertrophy sets. You got to get harder and harder and harder, heavier and heavier and heavier. But strength training is typically just like 1 to 3 reps. It's trying to do lots of very heavy maxing out to strengthen your stuff. I'm very poorly explaining this, very minimalism. But my point is the fact that doing a bunch of reps is good for your muscles, but doing one big, like 315-pound deadlift like I did yesterday, that feels good for the soul. It encourages me to keep working, right? I feel like game developers have kind of just gotten obsessed with doing the reps, of going in there and cranking out a crappy workout because it's decently good for you and then going home with minimal effort. I'm not calling developers lazy, but it just feels like the industry has kind of lost the point. There's work that's good for the body, and there's work that's good for the soul. And art is undoubtedly good for the soul. And at this point, it feels much more dead than it's supposed to be. But these have just been some off-the-cuff thoughts. What do you guys think about it? Tell me your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and be sure to like the video and keep dreaming. This is a very rambly video. I'm sure no one's going to watch. But if you watch this to the end, I appreciate it. I just wanted to talk about this because, honestly, this is so dumb. I feel like fans get mad when stuff gets messed up, but I feel like you guys will get a lot more mad when every piece of art is like the most factory-tested, HR-appropriate, sanded-down slop. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.